Welcome back to Cinema Recaps. Today, I'll tell you about a sci-fi action thriller from 2005. The movie is titled Let Me In. Warning, there are spoilers ahead, so watch out. In 1983, at a hospital in Los Alamos, New Mexico, a man is admitted with burns covering 95% of his body. He is a suspect in a major murder case. The detective is eager to interrogate him. He approaches the man, who is still lying in bed. The man is so disfigured that he cannot speak. But the detective has an idea. He leaves a small notepad and a pen on the table. And he tells the man that sooner or later, they'll find out who he is. So, he'd better confess to save everyone time. The man's heart rate speeds up when the detective asks about cults and Satanism. But their conversation is interrupted by a nurse. She tells the detective he has an urgent call. At that moment, the burned man begins to raise his hand to reach for the pen. The detective leaves the room to take the call from the receptionist. The receptionist informs him that the man's young daughter has been there but didn't leave any information. Suddenly, the nurse's scream echoes from the man's room. When the detective returns to check, he finds that the man has jumped out the window. Before leaving, he left a note on the pad. "I'm sorry, Abby." 2 weeks earlier, Owen, a lonely 12-year-old boy, was playing in the front yard of his apartment, eating candy. His mother called him inside for dinner. Owen buried the candy wrappers in the snow before heading in. Dinner turned tense when Owen's father called. They argued over the phone, leaving his mother crying on the couch. After eating, Owen took a knife from the kitchen back to his room. He practiced making threats with the knife, wearing a scary mask. He put the knife down when he heard a noise outside. Owen used a telescope to spy on his neighbors. Jack was exercising, while Larry and Virginia argued before getting intimate. Owen couldn't look away until Virginia noticed him. He hid, but looked again when he heard a car parking nearby. Owen decided to look out the window once more. The couple was gone, replaced by a middle-aged man. Thomas and a young girl named Abby moved into the apartment next to Owen's. For some reason, Abby walked around barefoot. The next morning on his way to school, Owen saw Abby's footprints in the snow. At school, Owen was frequently bullied by Kenny and his group of friends. First, Kenny threw a spitball at him during class. Then they cornered him in the locker room after swimming lessons. The bullies mocked him for not swimming and called him "little girl." They hit him with a towel and pushed him to the floor. Finally, they pulled his pants up until he wet himself. After school, Owen stopped by a store to buy candy and noticed a collection of knives. He decided he would buy a knife later. In the evening, Owen used the knife to stab a tree in the yard, practicing intimidation. Suddenly, Abby appeared, startling him. She was still barefoot on the snow. After a few words, Abby told him she couldn't be his friend, and left. Owen went back to stabbing the tree. A moment later, he saw Thomas leaving the building, dressed in black and carrying a bag. Thomas went to the store parking lot and broke into a car. He waited for the owner to return. The man came back with his groceries and drove off. Thomas only acted when the car stopped in front of the train tracks. He put on a mask, killed the driver, and dragged him into the woods, hanging him from a tree. Then Thomas slit the man's throat, letting the blood flow into a jug. However, he accidentally spilled the blood when he slipped, with no time to clean up as a truck was approaching. Thomas grabbed the jug with what little blood remained and returned to the apartment. Owen arrived home at the same time as Thomas and overheard an argument through the wall. A deep voice questioned if they should go out and handle it themselves. Thomas replied that perhaps he was getting careless due to exhaustion. He added that maybe he wanted to get caught to escape this. The next day, the detective and a police officer came to the school to ask some questions. The man killed the previous night was a recent graduate. In the evening, Owen went out to the yard again to play with his Rubik's Cube. Abby approached him once more and tried to make him leave, but it didn't work. Abby asked about the Rubik's Cube, and Owen taught her how to play. During this, he asked her why she walked around barefoot. Abby explained that she never felt cold. Owen lent her the Rubik's Cube for the night and returned to his apartment. She stayed outside playing, but the cube slipped from her hands. As her body began to ache, Abby walked into a nearby tunnel. She pretended to be a wounded child and called for help. Jack happened to find her and tried to help. When he lifted her up, Abby attacked him. She shook him hard and hit him several times before throwing him to the ground. Then Abby drank his blood and broke his neck to end his life. Moments later, Owen was spying on his neighbors again. He noticed Jack wasn't home, while he could hear Thomas through the wall. Through the wall, Thomas was scolding and insulting Abby for what she had done. Thomas hurriedly left the apartment. Cleaning up meant Thomas had to find Jack's body and throw it into the river. He used a pole to push the body deep underwater. The next morning, Owen found the Rubik's Cube solved, lying in the snow-covered yard. In the evening, he met Abby again, and after exchanging names, Abby told him she was about 12 years old and didn't know her birthday. Owen tried to give her the Rubik's Cube, but she declined. However, she agreed to teach him how to solve it. They spent the rest of the evening playing together. The following day, the teacher played a movie for the class to watch. Owen took the opportunity to learn Morse code, which Kenny noticed. The three bullies cornered Owen in the restroom. Kenny got angry when Owen didn't show him what he was writing. He hit Owen with a stick and called him little girl. The blow left a scar on Owen's cheek, along with a reminder not to tell anyone. At home, Owen lied to his mother, saying he fell at the playground. After dinner, he met Abby and showed her the Romeo and Juliet book he was reading. He also gave her a piece of paper with the Morse code key so they could talk through the wall. Abby was worried when she realized Owen could hear through the wall. When Owen asked about her parents, Abby said her mother had passed away. But she didn't answer when he asked why her father was angry the other day. After Owen shared that his parents were getting divorced, Abby asked about his injury. Owen told her the truth. Abby didn't like what she heard. She told Owen he had to fight back against the bullies, and if the knife wasn't enough, she would protect him. Owen seemed doubtful, but Abby placed her hand over his. She told him she was much stronger than she looked. When they returned to their respective rooms, they started using Morse code to talk through the wall. The next day, Owen met with the gym teacher and signed up for after-school strength training. Later, he secretly took some money from his mother's purse and took Abby to the arcade. He taught her how to play Mrs. Pac-Man. Then they went to a store to buy candy, but she declined. Seeing Owen disappointed that he couldn't share his favorite treat, Abby finally accepted one. But right afterward, she ran outside to throw up. She apologized to Owen, but he didn't mind. He hugged her, still worried. Abby asked if Owen liked her, and he answered yes. Then she asked if he would still like her if she wasn't a girl. Owen replied that he probably would. They walked back to the building together, with Abby mentioning that she had moved many times. Owen said he wanted to leave this awful town. As they held hands, Owen's mother called him back for dinner, interrupting them. They returned to their apartments after wishing each other good night. In her apartment, Abby saw Thomas getting ready to go out again because he had no choice. She tried to comfort him by gently touching his face, which Thomas appreciated. But he still asked her not to see Owen anymore. Thomas went out and broke into another car, hiding behind the back seat. He waited for the right moment to act. The driver picked up a friend, who tossed his bag into the back seat without noticing Thomas. Eventually, they stopped at a gas station, and the driver got out to buy something, leaving the radio on. The friend turned around to grab his bag and noticed Thomas. Thomas decided to attack immediately. The victim fought back fiercely, but Thomas finally managed to kill him after a struggle. The noises weren't heard thanks to the loud music. The car owner finally realized something was wrong when Thomas got into the driver's seat and started the car to drive away. Visibility became difficult when the car owner angrily threw a smoothie at the windshield. Thomas struggled to control the vehicle. The car went off the road into a ditch, flipping over and trapping both passengers under its weight. As the car owner approached and the police were on their way, Thomas took a bottle of acid from his bag. He poured the acid on his face to make himself unrecognizable. Back at the apartment, Owen and Abby touched hands through the wall. When Abby heard news about a burn victim murder suspect being hospitalized, she went to the hospital and asked to see her father, but the receptionist said that access was restricted by the police. As Abby was leaving, the receptionist noticed she was barefoot and felt sympathy for her. But when she went outside to call her back, Abby had already vanished. The receptionist decided to call the detective to report Abby. This brings us back to the beginning of the story. Abby climbed up the building and looked at Thomas through the window. After lightly tapping on the glass, Thomas approached and signaled that he couldn't speak. When she asked to come in, they pressed their foreheads together. Thomas offered his neck for Abby to feed, and she accepted. He gradually lost consciousness as his body slid from the window, falling onto the snow below. A few minutes later, Abby appeared at Owen's window. She woke him up and asked him not to turn around and look. Abby asked for permission to come in, and Owen agreed. She took off her clothes and lay on the bed with Owen. He noticed her body was ice cold and wondered how she got in. She simply replied that she flew in, but he didn't believe her. Owen decided to ask if she would be his girlfriend. Abby refused, saying she wasn't a girl, she was nothing. But when Owen explained that nothing would change, Abby changed her mind. She took his hand and placed it on her cheek, accepting his proposal. The next morning, Owen woke up alone and found a letter from Abby. She wrote that she had to leave to survive or stay and die. The gym teacher took the class to the frozen lake for hockey and ice skating. Once again, Owen was cornered by the bullies. He gripped a metal rod to defend himself. Kenny tried to grab the rod from Owen, but Owen hit him on the head, injuring his ear. The teacher was about to check on them, but got distracted by a sudden scream from a group of students. They had just found Jack's body under the ice. Afterward, Owen and his mother met with the principal to discuss his actions. At home, they were visited by a detective who wanted to ask some questions. Owen was sent to his room, and when he looked out the window, he saw the police investigating Jack's apartment. Later, Owen sent a message to Abby in Morse code, but she didn't respond. A detective was ringing the doorbell at Abby's apartment. Looking through the peephole, Abby decided not to open the door, and the officer eventually left. The next day, after working out in the school gym, Owen saw Kenny being bullied by his friends and older brother because of his injured ear. His brother took his car keys and called him little girl. That evening, Owen met with Abby and told her about standing up for himself. Abby was proud of Owen and rewarded him with a kiss on the cheek. After that, Owen took Abby to an abandoned apartment that an old neighbor had shown him, a place no one knew about. Abby played some music and asked Owen what he wanted to do. Owen responded by cutting his finger to make a blood pact. The smell of blood affected Abby, and though she tried to hold back, she couldn't resist. Her face gradually transformed into a monstrous form, and she fell to the floor, drinking the blood that had dripped there. When Owen called her name, Abby told him to stay away, but she ended up running off herself and climbing a tree. At that moment, Virginia walked by with her dog, with Larry not far behind. Abby jumped down when Virginia got closer and started feeding on her. Larry pushed Abby off and struggled against her, and after a moment of resistance, Abby ran away. A little while later, Owen saw an ambulance taking Virginia away while he wrapped a bandage around his finger. Owen tried to talk to his mother, but she was fast asleep, so he called his dad instead. He asked his father if truly evil people existed. His dad misunderstood the question and thought Owen's mum was putting negative ideas in his head. He said they'd talk about it later, leaving Owen upset and crying alone. Owen decided to visit Abby, asking permission to enter when she was ready. As they began talking, Abby confirmed Owen's suspicions. She was a vampire who needed blood to survive and had been 12 years old for a very long time. Thomas wasn't her father. Among her collection of puzzle toys, Owen found an old photo of Abby and Thomas. Abby looked exactly the same, while Thomas was a boy, just like them. This frightened Owen, and he wanted to leave, but Abby blocked his way. She only let him go after he voiced aloud what she might do to him. As he was leaving, Abby reminded him that she had told him they couldn't be friends. At the hospital, detectives visited Larry and Virginia as part of their investigation. While the detective questioned Larry, Virginia awoke with her eyes transformed like a vampire's. She noticed the IV inserted in her arm and removed it to drink the blood from the wound. When a nurse entered the room and opened the curtains, sunlight flooded in. The light set Virginia ablaze, with flames quickly spreading around the room and to the nurse. Owen saw the news about the hospital fire while having dinner alone in his apartment as his mother was meeting with lawyers. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. It was Abby, asking him to invite her in. Owen didn't understand why she couldn't just enter, so Abby showed him why. As soon as she stepped inside, her body began bleeding from everywhere. Owen quickly caught on and said aloud that she was allowed in, then hugged her tightly. As Abby took a shower, Owen cleaned the floor and threw away her dirty clothes. He put on some music and told Abby she could borrow one of his mother's dresses. Just then, Owen's mother returned home. The two kids ran into Owen's room, and Abby climbed out the window to return to her apartment. A little later, after checking that his mother was asleep, Owen went to Abby's apartment. Owen spent the night with Abby, sleeping on the floor. The next morning, he found a note from Abby saying she was in the bathroom, and he shouldn't enter. There was an unexpected knock at the door, and Owen looked through the peephole to see the detective. He stepped back, intending not to open the door, but stepped on a loose floorboard that creaked, giving him away. The detective forced the door open, gun ready, while Owen hid under the table. The detective began searching the apartment, finding the wallets of the victims and Abby's note on the floor. This led him toward the bathroom. Inside, he found a pile of blankets in the bathtub. When he pulled the blankets away, he found Abby sleeping underneath them. Needing more light, the detective started removing the boards covering the windows. But Owen stopped him just in time as a burn appeared on Abby's leg. Now awake, Abby jumped onto the detective and began drinking his blood. The detective reached out to Owen, silently pleading for help. But Owen could only close the door and step back. When Abby emerged, she hugged Owen and told him she had to leave, then kissed him goodbye. A few hours later, Owen looked out the window and cried as he saw Abby leaving in a taxi. She had hidden the detective's body in the abandoned room where they used to spend time together. The next day, Owen attended swim class. His teacher left the pool area when one of the bullies called him over to see a trash can on fire. The fire had been started by Kenny and his group as part of their plan. While the teacher was outside, the four bullies locked the door behind him and entered the pool area, ordering everyone else to leave, except Owen. Owen tried to escape through the locker room, but they caught him and brought him back to the pool. Kenny's older brother grabbed Owen by the hair and told him that if he could hold his breath underwater for 3 minutes, he'd only get a small cut. But if he couldn't, he'd lose one of his eyes. Owen was pushed underwater and held down when suddenly he started hearing strange noises, the sound of breaking glass and the bullies screaming. Blood began spreading in the pool. Even the head of one of the bullies fell into the water. It took a moment, but Owen finally managed to get out of the pool. As he caught his breath, he realized Abby had returned. She had killed all the bullies to save him. The next day, Owen sat on a train, eating his favorite candy. In front of him was a large trunk. After showing his ticket to the conductor, Owen knocked on the trunk to send a message in Morse code, and Abby knocked back from inside. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications to see more videos like this. Thank you for watching.